I have a confession to make. I suck at the piano. I do my best to get around on the keyboard when it's time to play in melodies and that sort of thing with a human feel, because that's the best way to capture velocity. It's with human fingers and human imprecisions on a keyboard. But when I write music, I tend to use instruments with which I'm more familiar. I'm far more likely to sit down with my violin or a guitar when it's time to work out ideas than I would be to sit down at a piano. And that adds an extra step when it comes time to play these ideas into the computer, since there is no MIDI violin or MIDI guitar. Or is there? This is the Jamstik Studio MIDI guitar. It's made by a Minneapolis-based company called Zivix. They were kind enough to send me this instrument for free to play around with. They have not, however, paid me to make this video. So before we dive into this instrument, here's a little bit of history behind Zivix. The original Jamstik came out in 2014 after Zivix launched a successful Indiegogo campaign. It was named one of the best inventions of the year by Pop Science. It was largely an educational tool, and compatibility with apps like Jamstik Play and Jam Tutor made for a really cool learning and playing experience. They launched a few upgraded versions of the original Jamstik, each one a little more advanced and with more functionality than the last. Again, these were sort of guitar oddities that could be really useful in specific situations, but nobody would confuse one with a real guitar. This, on the other hand, looks like a guitar, feels like a guitar, and plays like a guitar. Because it is a guitar. It is a guitar with the added functionality of transmitting MIDI data just as well as it transmits audio. When I first told my musician friends that I had one of these headed my way that I was going to get to play around with, their first reactions were mostly to be stoked for me because it's pretty cool. Their second reactions were by and large to be skeptical, and who can blame them? Because after all, how could technology have possibly advanced far enough to where a guitar MIDI controller would be anything but frustratingly buggy? And so they wanted to know, how does it work? How well does it work? And is it a useful addition to a production setup, or is it just another toy that won't really make a dent in your workflow? And that's precisely what we're here to find out today. But first, some specs. The Studio MIDI guitar is a headless 24-fret electric guitar. As the name suggests, it has full MIDI capabilities. The MIDI signal is powered by Jamstik signal processing technology and proprietary algorithms. That's what makes this guitar special. The brains behind the operation. The fact that the processing is done on board the instrument means it won't hog all of your CPU if you're working with a slower computer. The MIDI out options include USB-C, 3.5mm TRS, and Bluetooth. On the electric guitar front, it has two humbuckers, a coil tap switch, a three-way switch, and a standard 1/4-inch out. The body is made of mahogany, and the C-shaped neck is made of maple. The fretboard is rosewood with mother-of-pearl inlay. It weighs in at 5.5 pounds, which is just about a half-pound lighter than the lighter side of electric guitars, which range from about 6 to 10 pounds generally. But it still feels like a substantial instrument. The body is a little smaller than your typical guitar, and it's got no head.
So no head?
Both of which make it a little easier for travel, but it still feels more or less like real guitar proportions. It comes with a custom padded gig bag, the required USB-C to A cable and adapter, a 3.5mm TRS to MIDI cable, a 1/4-inch guitar cable, some strap locks, Allen keys, a manual, and a guitar pick. It also comes with the Jamstik Creator software, which is available for both Mac and PC. I will take you on a quick tour of the plugin right now. Okay, so here we have the Jamstik Creator plugin pulled up in an Ableton Live 11 session. This plugin is compatible with all the DAWs with which you would expect it to be compatible, although some features end up a little limited depending on which DAW you're using. MPE, which stands for MIDI Polyphonic Expression, is not fully supported by all of the DAWs out there, Ableton Live 11 included. But it ends up working just fine with all of the VSTs that I've paired with the Jamstik anyway, so we'll stick with Ableton for now. There's a lot going on in this interface, but you can sort of read it from top to bottom. When you first initialize the plugin, it's going to have the preset browser loaded up, it has a tab right up here, and then this is the browser itself. The preset browser is a quick and easy entry into the instrument side of the plugin. It's a pretty powerful instrument library with some sounds that are clearly synthesized but well synthesized, and some others that sound like they must have been like sampled off of physical instruments. So it's got a pretty good range and a smattering of this and that. So it's organized like most preset browsers in a synth engine, with like type on the left and instrument. So getting a little bit more specific. Enough of me talking. Let's hear how some of these sound. The first one that it pops up with, let's see. Let's try this together. Heavily modulated in-your-face synth lead. That's what it's telling us. Inspired by Muramasa. So that might be kind of limited just because it's got those same rhythmic patterns each time. That might get a little old, but let's hear what the synthy strings sound like. It's got a guitaro kind of feel to it. It's kind of nice. Interesting. I don't know. So it got stuck on that A. I wonder if it'll do that again. Yeah, it's still going. Something weird's happening. So it seems like I'm able to stop it whenever it gets stuck like that, but if you are in a situation, I wasn't expecting this to happen so quickly, where stuff gets stuck, you can press this MIDI panic button and it will like reset your MIDI values. So whatever this is sending, whatever the guitar is sending, it'll stop that and you can start fresh. That was not a situation for the MIDI panic because I was able to stop the send, but at any rate, something to keep in mind. Glad I got a chance to mention that. Let's hear the aggressive synth bass. That's pretty aggressive. Heck yeah. All right, let's hear our Brahm. How about some celestial strums? Nice. You can also edit these. If you go up to the editor window, you can play around with how these sound. These have an LFO going on. So if we wanted to make that rate even faster, we can move up to the 30-second note. Even faster, 64th note. After a while, it's going to start sounding like you've just got something that's clipping, or if we go with a sine wave instead of a... It might be too fast for us to notice the difference that would be. Yeah. So it's not like on and off. There's a little bit more curvature to the curve, to the wave. Yeah, lots of stuff that you can do with the editor in working with the presets that are already here. You could start with a preset, get this close to the sound that you want, and then dial it in the rest of the way. That's really how we should all be using presets is just to get us started, but sometimes we don't have time for that. So let's summarize what we've seen so far and heard so far. These sounds are not that exciting. They are not at the cutting edge of audio software development. What they are, though, is really well calibrated to the signal that is coming from the Jamstik. When I play something on the Jamstik and send it to this plugin, the sounds pick up and they're ready to go. As you'll hear in a minute, that calibration to the Jamstik is a really important variable to consider because, as we will soon hear, the Jamstik doesn't always play well with others. Before we leave Jamstik Creator, though, let's take a look at the other critical purpose that Jamstik Creator serves, which is essentially calibrating the instrument. So I mentioned before that the MIDI processing functionality in the Jamstik actually happens on board the instrument and not in the plugin. The functionality is just a little bit limited in Ableton when it comes to calibration functions in particular. So what I'm going to do now is close out of Ableton and load up the standalone plugin for this part of the video. Now, the first thing you want to do basically anytime you hook your Jamstik up to Jamstik Creator and start working is you're going to want to check the tuning, which is something that I did not do before this video. And you might have noticed that basically Jamstik stops communicating effectively with Jamstik Creator anytime it goes too far out of tune. Let's check the tuning here. Okay, so now we're back in business. I'm going to put this right back on the bridge so that I don't lose it today. You can change if you want to do alternative tunings. You've got all these different possibilities, and you can customize as well if none of these alternative tunings are alternative enough for you. You might notice that when I'm playing, some of these strings are a little hotter than other strings. You can see the velocity right here, right? So the lower strings, like E and A in particular is a little hot. Those three, the thick strings, are like pretty high velocity. It's picking up. I guess that one too. But the good thing with your, you can calibrate it so that your string sensitivity is different on strings that are not coming through as clearly. So strings 1 and 2 are incredibly sensitive. That's your B and your E strings. And then string 5, I turn down quite a bit so that when you are recording MIDI, that should sort of even out a little bit. Also in the device settings is the MIDI mode setting. Now right now we are in MPE, which stands for MIDI polyphonic expression. That is a setting, like I mentioned before, that is only partially supported by Ableton Live 11, but it is the one that sends the most information, and it's what allows you to do the pitch bend that changes one pitch but not the other. So by that I'm talking about a bend where you keep one note the same and then you bend the other note. You can do pitch bends on traditional MIDI keyboards, but if you have two pitches down and you use the pitch bend wheel, it's going to change both pitches. Here that is not the case. You can modify one note without modifying the other. I think that's pretty cool. And especially because you can't do that with your traditional MIDI keyboard. But speaking of pitch bend, if you're using an instrument where you don't want to bend the pitch, like if you can't really bend a pitch on a piano, right? So if you're using a piano and you don't want to accidentally bend the pitch, if you're a clumsy guitarist like I am and you're worried that you might accidentally send some pitch bend information you don't mean to send, you just hit the power button right there and it'll stop sending that information. So then, well, I guess it's not perfect, but yeah, now it's just thinking that I'm, I guess if it's small bends, then it's not such a big deal. But if you're doing a big bend, it's going to think that you're just on a different fret. If you're playing with some other VSTs and you want to be able to bend pitch in those VSTs, you want to check to make sure that your pitch bend range is the same both in Jamstik Creator and the other VST that you're going to be working with. This is one of those situations where you're not playing through Jamstik Creator anymore, but this is where Jamstik Creator is acting as a terminal to the firmware that's in your instrument. So let's say you're working with an instrument where you need a pitch bend range of 10 or 12. Let's go 12, so it's an octave. You set that to 12, and then you close out Jamstik Creator. When you open up the VST in your DAW, it's going to this is going to be ready to operate with a pitch bend range of 12 steps or an octave. But for now, let's go back to 2 because that feels normal. And then, yeah, that's something that you have to do with Fluid Pitch too, which is a cool plugin that we reviewed a little while back. Fluid Pitch might open up some interesting additional functionality for the Jamstik. And I haven't thought too far into it, but I think there's a lot there. So check out that video if you haven't already. We're going to come back to this string envelope send control when we try Jamstik out with other VST instruments. So actually, let's do that right now. We're going to close out of the standalone plugin, and we will open up a DAW and play around with some other VSTs. All right, so I've got Ableton Live 11 back open, and I'm going to grab a different plugin to work with. I think I'm going to go for Serum because I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to work well together. And you can tell I've already got some sound coming in, even though I do not have Jamstik Creator open because, again, Jamstik Creator is not your go-between. Your computer's in here. It's sending the sound, and Jamstik Creator is just that terminal, that interface, so that you can manipulate what's going on in here. Let's hear how this sounds. Maybe it's that I'm not a very good guitarist, but it felt like there was a little bit of lag that was making it hard to play with that sort of rhythmic element. So let's do something with a pad. I love that. I think what I'm really interested is the sequence stuff. Let's hear how that sounds. That's not what you would expect to go well with a MIDI guitar. Maybe a MIDI keyboard, but oh, and then it just stopped receiving signal. It's only sending signal as long as the string is resonating. It's not like a keyboard where you put your finger down and just keep it down and it's fine. This will eventually stop sending the signal. But I think that's something you can work your way around. And if you're composing, you go back into the MIDI grid and you just drag it out as long as you want it to be there. So that's something to think about. These random melodic ideas I'm just sort of throwing together are probably not the ones that I would come up with if I were sitting at the keyboard. There is a dramatic difference in the tactile sensation of playing a keyboard versus playing a guitar. And so none of these are all that special, but if I spent 20 or 30 minutes working on one, I could develop it into something much more exciting, and then that could be the basis of a larger project. And so I can't even count the number of times I've been sitting at a keyboard. I've gotten a little bit of writer's block. I just can't seem to get any ideas out. And so I throw up my hands and walk away from the keyboard and from the studio for the day. I much prefer the idea of being able to throw up my hands at the keyboard, but then walk over to the guitar and pick up where I left off, but with a little more inspiration and something that feels different under my hands. Because that's really what we need a lot of times, is something different. I alluded earlier to some instruments that might not work all that well with the Jamstik, at least not without some tweaking. And here's what I mean. BBC Symphony Orchestra, which will take a second to load, that's my go-to orchestral plugin at the beginning of an orchestral project. So you can imagine my disappointment when I first opened it up to play with the Jamstik and heard something more along the lines like this. So that's kind of a bummer, right? We're getting this like sort of pitiful onset at about 25% of expression that tapers out almost immediately. And that's what you might expect from a plucked string instrument, which is what the Jamstik essentially is. But it's not what you want from a bowed string instrument, which is why we have bows. Those are there for the purpose of sustaining tone. The thing is, we weren't getting the same issue with the with Jamstik Creator, nor were we having this problem with Serum. And the difference is BBC Symphony Orchestra is a big, powerful plugin that does a lot of work with the MIDI data that we send it. It's designed to be making constant adjustments to expression based on what you're sending it from an expression fader. And we don't have an expression fader on the Jamstik, but we are sending it expression, and those velocity values are updated constantly, unless we make one small change that is going to make this it'll work all of a sudden, which is great. So we're going to go to the Jamstik Creator plugin, and we are going to disable the string envelope send. That's going to just send one velocity, and velocity is what's coding for our expression here. So we're only going to send one from each onset, and it won't continuously update. So let's hear how that sounds. But yeah, so now we can use it. Now it sounds good. It is going to be maybe a little bit less lifelike because we don't have that variable expression anymore. But that's something you can go back after the fact and play around with the controls within the MIDI grid and fix it up just how you like it. So that's a general run through of how the Jamstik performs in its expressly intended setting. It is a solid instrument, it plays well, it's adaptable, and it will likely fit into your workflow without a whole lot of reorganization. It plays my VSTs really nicely, especially with a few little tweaks in the settings, which were pretty easy to sniff out. And so to answer the question, is this technology too good to be true? I would say the answer is no, it's not. And so if you want to add a MIDI guitar to your workflow, I don't think you need to wait for a later future iteration. I think this might be the instrument for you. This is also a regular electric guitar. So I mean, that's probably not why you're watching this video. It's probably not why you're looking into this particular instrument, but it is an electric guitar. So how does it sound? And then question number 2, what are some of the possible live uses of this instrument? To answer question number 1, I have plugged the Jamstik into my interface using a 1/4-inch cable, and I'm running it through Neural DSP's Fortin NTS suite. Bear with me, I'm a little rusty. Yeah, it works just fine. But to answer question 2, I do not, as of right now, anticipate anybody is going to be using this as their go-to live guitar in guitar classic mode, just running sound out of a 1/4-inch cable. I do, however, see a lot of potential in people using this guitar for its MIDI triggering capacities in a live setting. I'm thinking in particular of Andrew Bird and Zoe Keating, both of whom are strings players who build up these massive, lush textures using live looping. Andrew Bird plays out of a Line 6 delay pedal, and Zoe Keating plays through a computer. I'm not sure exactly what she uses. Anyway, all that is to say that I think this instrument holds a lot of promise for that kind of group or solo acts making big, interesting performances out of one tiny little instrument. And I wouldn't be surprised if some innovative performers start taking this thing out of the studio and onto the stage to create new sound worlds and new interesting audience experiences for people attending their shows. Thanks so much for hanging out with me as I took the Jamstik Studio MIDI guitar for a spin. I hope I've answered some of the questions you came here with. If I missed anything, be sure to leave a comment so that we can all learn from each other. If you have learned something, if you have found the video just a little bit entertaining, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the Producer Hive YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so that you are aware next time we put something out. For a ton of print resources, including reviews and informational articles and frequently asked questions, that sort of thing, check out producerhive.com. We've got new stuff coming out pretty much every day, and just an enormous back catalog of really interesting, informative stuff. And I think that just about covers it. I've been Noah with Producer Hive, and thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time.